Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to another episode of that show that will not be named. I am your host Brian, or 2K Prince, whatever you prefer. And I'd like to tell y'all about something I watched recently. By recently, I mean probably about half a year ago. And that was the original run of Berserk. You know, the original show, the 1990s, 1980s, I don't know what the fuck. My friends were over one night and they were watching it, and soon I ended up having to go to bed for work the next morning, so I wasn't able to stay up and watch it with them. So, I ended up just, I ended up eventually going back on and watching the whole thing all over again, and one thing I really like about it, which it kind of fulfills this sort of feeling in old fantasy, like dark fantasy. Like, I don't see many dark fantasy shows anymore, dark fantasy movies or anything like that. And for me, it's kind of this like aesthetic of, perfect example. Have any of you ever seen 1985's Legend with Tom Cruise? Tim Curry plays Darkness. Pretty much the coolest interpretation of the devil ever. Have any of you seen that? If any of you haven't, I would definitely suggest going out immediately and renting that movie or pirating it, however you can. Get the American version, not the director's cut. Get the American version, or watch clips online. It is one of all the effects. Practical. Mwah. Beautiful film. Great story, great characters. It's one of those few films in which I actually give a shit about what happens to everyone in it. Even the bad guy, even when the bad guy gets defeated, I feel a smidgen bad for him. But in Berserk, that's kind of what I feel. I get that same feeling that Legend gave me. And it's this kind of aesthetic of just this dark fantasy where evil is just evil to be evil. And why is that? Because it's evil, obviously. But it's kind of like there's this unspoken purpose for it, you know? And good people... My battery's dead. 1 second, please. All the people in it, the good people, good guys, heroes, whatever, they all seem to, there we go. They all seem to, they fight this evil, because one of the things that I like about it is, at least in Berserk, I've been jumping back and forth with the idea of, does fate exist? Does fate not exist? And I know they mention that in the opening monologue, every character with the skeleton hand or the branch hand holding the Baelith, the Behelit, whatever. And I noticed that they play with that in the beginning of the series, where it's just like, well, is it fate pushing it? Is he destined to do this? Or is this just the way shit's working out? And I like to go with the philosophy that I don't think fate exists in the show. Same thing in most dark fantasy. Like, when I write dark fantasy, I put fate as being... Like, there are definitely powers that try to make fate happen. Perfect example, the God Hand, when they turned Griffith. I don't really think it was fate, like it was destined to happen. I just believe that the God Hand were 90% sure he was going to say yes, so, they paraded around like, it's fate, it's destiny. But I do believe that there could have been an instance where he said, no, fuck you guys, I'm not doing it. I believe that, sincerely. And it's just that aesthetic of dark fantasy that just seems like there's no... I don't want to say there's no dragons in it, because there's definitely dragons in Berserk. But they're just... In dark fantasy, there seems a much more grounded sense of realism. That just evil is ever present, but it can be combated. And one of the perfect examples of that comes in the form of Skull Knight. And Skull Knight, one of the coolest characters in Dark Fantasy. I'm pissed I didn't think this guy up. I'm a writer if you haven't told, couldn't tell by now. But it just seems like, you guys ever heard of, I do a lot of references back here and there. You're gonna get that the longer you watch this. Have you guys ever heard of Solomon Kane? Solomon Kane is this guy created by, Derleth something, the same guy who pretty much made Conan the Barbarian. But Solomon Kane is this guy, he's like a Puritan, used to be a piece of shit, he's trying to redeem himself. But he's basically this dude who travels the world and fights evil. It's like, why are you fighting evil? Because I'm good, obviously. What more reason do you need? It's a guy who feels his entire need is to destroy everything evil. Because that is good. And I've got my train of thought on this. In the same vein, I feel that Skull Knight is very much like that. He solely exists to destroy evil. Why? Because that is his purpose. And people have been going back and forth and drawing conclusions like, oh, Skull Knight's this ruler from 100 years ago, and Skull Knight's, ooh, it's elfin armor he's wearing. So maybe he's got like a transmutation, Full Metal Alchemist thing going on. And underneath all of that, I really don't care. It's more or less just the fact that he's just absolute good. Or unstoppable good. Or chaotic good, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And he just solely exists to do harm to the things that would do other people harm. Like Solomon Kane. And I just think that's such a cool idea in a series whose entire basis seems to dwell on the fact that happiness is ever fleeting. Happiness is it's instantaneous, and then it goes away. And everything else that follows is just misery and survival. And then it's then you're offered this person, this entity, whose sole purpose is to ensure that evil stays gone. And honestly, I think Guts is a great character for this world, just because he's literally been the one that he's nearly had everything thrown at him. Mother dead, father dead, abusive father, beatings, lashings, getting torn apart, having his loved one break. This guy has been through the fucking ringer. Way more than most other fictional characters. I mean, this guy, the only thing that's missing is to have his mouth, bent down, duct taped to his own asshole, and have him shit in his own mouth and eat it. That's the last thing you gotta do to this guy to make his suffering, complete. Either that or peel off all of his skin. Other than that, this guy's been through the fucking ringer. And Guts, through all of this, I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't keep up with the comics, because I do. I try to keep up with the manga. But does anyone ever think that maybe he's gonna go evil at the end of all of it? I'm not sure if many people have brought this up, but what if, hear me out here, what if by the end of it, after Guts gets the Berserker armor and, all this shit, what if he ends up becoming so evil, bent on revenge, that he just becomes this entity of total, darkness and destruction? And in the end of it all, Griffith, who in his prior form was more representative of light, ends up becoming a savior. Anyone think that? Anyone even bouncing that idea around? Because the way that they look, Griffith, if he were to look anything like he used to, looks good. Looks like a representation of light. Whereas the way that Guts is going, every time I look at him, he seems to look more and more like a villain of something. So I thought, what if there was a day that Griffith repented and became good, and then Guts, soaking himself in so much evil energies, eventually became just absolute darkness. And the two duked it out, and it would become, Devilman versus Lucifer. I don't fucking know. But I was bouncing this idea around, and I just thought that was very interesting. Not only that, but again, the aesthetic of dark fantasy. And it's just one of those things that really gets my juices pumping. There's just so much that you can contemplate in it. And so much philosophy that comes into play when thinking about it. It's just other times when I'm lying awake in bed thinking about it, I can think more than I can verbally word it, you know what I mean? And that's just one of the things about it that just makes the show all that more amazing. It makes the anime all that more incredible. Yeah, and I think that's going to about do it. I'll see you all next time. Thank you for joining me, and have a good night.